My encounter takes place in Middle Mississippi and happened in the summer of 2019. It was the last solo fishing trip I ever took. My name is Steve, and I've lived here in Mississippi my entire life. I grew up with a love of fishing that my dad passed down to me, being his only son. Dad knew all the great spots, it seemed. There was a few that he always referred to as honey holes. I hadn't been fishing in a couple of months at the time of my encounter, and I was itching to go. Since it had been so long, I wanted to go somewhere I was confident that I'd have some success. One of my dad's honey holes came to mind, so that's where I set off to. I asked a buddy of mine to come along, and he agreed. But the morning of, he canceled at the last minute, and I have to admit, I was thinking about calling the whole thing off. But I was itching to get some lines in the water. It was one of my regular spots. I wouldn't have no problem going alone, but this place was literally in the middle of nowhere. When I say this place is in the middle of nowhere, that's exactly what I mean. Once you make it out to the gravel road that the spot is on, it's a good 45-minute drive at about 10 miles per hour. It's just completely rutted out, and if you aren't in a four-wheel drive, you're not getting out there. The spot is right beside an old, very creepy-looking cemetery. I've never been one to get spooked by ghosts or paranormal stuff, so being that close to a graveyard never bothered me. I hadn't been up there in probably a decade or better, and only a handful of times in my entire life. I remember when I was a kid asking my dad one time why we didn't come here more often since we seemed to do better than anywhere else. I remember him telling me that he wasn't really sure why, but he always got creeped out there. I just always assumed it was due to the cemetery. Anyway, I finally arrived and I'm shocked at the sight of the place. It was so grown up. Grass to my knees in places. If I thought it was creepy back then, that was nothing compared to how it looked now. Again, I thought about just leaving and going somewhere else, but I'd already made the drive and I was itching to fish. I put it in park and got my gear together. You had to walk down a pretty steep little ridge to get to the water, so I found myself a pretty worn game trail and made my way down to the water. I swear I threw my first cast out and hooked a largemouth. I brought it in and it was every bit of 2 pounds. I was in heaven, and all the trouble to get there was now worth it. I caught the bass on a lure, but I had 2 other poles that were set up with live bait and one for catfish. I put some chicken liver on my cat rig and a night crawler on the other, so I could keep fishing with my jig. I kid you not that I didn't even get another cast off before my night crawler rig got a bite. I pulled in a very nice crappie about the size of my hand. Man, they were biting and I was loving it. But just a few minutes later, the fun was broken up by something that caught my eye. It was above me and caused me to look straight up. It was a basketball-sized rock that came flying from my 2 o'clock position. Now this rattled. It definitely got my attention and I yelled out, "Damn it, man!" I don't even know who I was talking to because there was no one that I knew that could throw a rock that size that far. It landed in the middle of the pond and caused the water to splash up and rain down on me. About that time, my cat pole bent just about in half. My mind went straight to action and I grabbed for the pole. It was bit so hard that the pole pulled off the Y-shaped stick that I had it propped up on. I started reeling and fought this big bastard for about 10 minutes, but I got him in. I was never able to weigh him, but 20 pounds was not out of the realm of possibility. I all but forgot about the rock at that point. I caught a couple of more over the next 20 minutes or so, all keepers. I had strung them up and was already making plans for the fish fry that was going to be happening the following weekend. That's when nature called. Not just called, but slapped me in the face. I all of a sudden had this Mondo Duke on deck and I had to go. I ran up the hill, grabbed a 5-gallon bucket that I kept in the bed of the truck, just for these kind of emergencies, and found a tree to hide behind. Why I was hiding, I don't know. It was clear that nobody had been there in years. Nonetheless, that's what I did. I finished up my business, cleaned up, and started back down. That's when my life changed forever. I stopped in my tracks when I saw this giant bastard standing in the water with my string of fish in his hand. The catfish that I'd caught earlier was so much bigger than the other ones, so it wasn't hard noticing it, but there was only half of it left. I could see blood dripping down from it and the fish guts hanging down out of it. The damn thing had eaten half of my catfish. I really didn't care at that moment because, honestly, I was terrified. I turned and ran for the truck. This was when I realized that I'd made a huge mistake. My dad would have been so disappointed in me if he had seen me. He always told me to make sure that I had my vehicle turned and facing the way out, so if something happened and I needed to get out of the area quickly, I wouldn't have to take the time to turn around. I was turned the wrong damn way. Luckily, my keys were in the ignition. I took one last look before I opened the door to get in, and I could see the top of its head. It was coming for me. I got in and got turned around in record time, and I floored it. I was going to have to pass right by this thing, though. It was my only option, so I stepped on it. As I passed, it reached out and slapped the bed of my truck. I swear I felt the ass end fishtail a bit. I didn't even care about the hundreds of dollars in equipment I was leaving behind. I was just happy to be leaving with my life. I know people are going to hear this and say that I'm full of it, and I would too if I'd heard it instead of living it. This happened, though, and I'm not the same for it. I still fish, but never alone, and always in areas where there are other people. After my experience, I can now understand how so many people go missing from our forests. Don't be fooled. There are monsters in the woods of North America. I know, because I saw one.